Hey there, history enthusiasts. If you're drawn to the whispers of the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below your thoughts. Keep these tales alive. Let's ease into a serene corner of ancient England, where the world slows to the rhythm of ink on parchment. Imagine, if you will, the gentle hush of a foggy dawn at Lindisfarne, that remote island monastery off England's northeastern shore. It's the 8th or 9th century, a time when the Anglo Saxon world balanced on the edge of faith and fragility. Here, in the dim light filtering through narrow windows, a group of monks begins their day, their wool robes soft against the skin, heavy with the chill of stone walls that have stood for generations. The air carries a faint, earthy scent of damp rock and sea spray, mingling with the musty aroma of aged vellum, as if the very pages breathe the island's solitude. These men, scribes by calling, rise before the sun fully claims the sky, their movements deliberate and unhurried, like the slow unfurling of a manuscript scroll. Dressed in simple tunics of undyed wool, coarse yet comforting, they make their way to the scriptorium, a stark stone chamber where the world outside fades into irrelevance. No clamor of crowds or clash of arms disturbs this sanctuary. Only the soft shuffle of sandaled feet on cold flagstones echoes through the space. The room is a haven of quiet craftsmanship, its walls etched with faint traces of previous labors, where each monk settles at a wooden desk worn smooth by years of patient hands. In this dimly lit realm, the scribe's day unfolds with a rhythm as steady as the tides lapping at Lindisfarne's shores. He selects a quill from a bundle, its feathers still bearing the whisper of a distant bird's flight, and dips it into a pot of ink made from oak galls and iron, a deep black that gleams like midnight water. The first stroke is tentative, a light scratch against the parchment surface, a sound so subtle it might be mistaken for the rustle of leaves in a forgotten grove. This scratch, repeated hour after hour, becomes a lullaby of its own, a gentle cadence that lulls the mind into a state of focused tranquility. The parchment, prepared from calfskin, feels cool and slightly uneven under his fingertips, its texture a reminder of the animal's life, now transformed into a vessel for words. The scribes work in near silence, their heads bowed over illuminated texts from earlier ages, copying passages from holy books or annals like those in the Anglo Saxon Chronicle. That chronicle, begun in the late 9th century, though its roots trace back further, records the sweep of events in spare, factual prose, kings' reigns, harvests, and occasional omens. But here, in the scriptorium, it's not the grand narratives that captivate. Instead, it's the meticulous art of replication, the careful shaping of letters with a quill that must be sharpened just so, to avoid blots that could mar the page. Each letter formed is an act of devotion, a link in an unbroken chain of knowledge, preserved against the erosion of time. Picture the scene. The scribe sits on a low stool, his wool robe draping around him like a cocoon. The fabrics weave rough against his legs, warmed only by the faint heat of a nearby brazier. The brazier's glow casts a soft, amber light across the room, flickering just enough to illuminate the vellum without overwhelming the eyes. The air is cool, carrying a hint of smoke from the burning charcoal, mixed with the sharp tang of the ink as he works. The quill's tip glides and pauses, creating a symphony of tiny sounds: the faint scrape, the occasional dip into the inkwell, the soft sigh as he blows gently on wet letters to speed their drying. These sensory details envelop him, turning the scriptorium into a world unto itself, where the outside troubles of Viking raids or shifting alliances are mere echoes, distant and indistinct. Solitude is the scribe's constant companion, a gentle guardian that allows for deep reflection. In this era, monasteries like Lindisfarne served as beacons of learning, drawing men who sought not glory in battle, but meaning in the written word. A scribe might spend his entire life in such a place, rising with the matins bells and retiring long after vespers, his days marked not by seasons of war, but by the turning of pages. The craft demands patience, a virtue honed through endless repetition. One manuscript could take months, with each page requiring precise alignment of text and illustration. The monks illuminate their works with vibrant colors: crimson from madder roots, azure from lapis lazuli traded from afar, adding flourishes that dance across the margins like whispers of beauty in an austere world. Yet for all this dedication, a quiet mystery shrouds these scribes, one that lingers like the fog over Lindisfarne's beaches. Their names, so often unrecorded in the annals they helped preserve, vanish into the ether of history. The Anglo Saxon Chronicle, for instance, notes events with the detachment of a distant observer, mentioning scribes only in passing, if at all, as anonymous hands that copied its entries. Why this omission? Perhaps it was humility, a belief that the work itself was the true legacy, not the individual behind it. Or maybe the fragility of life in that age, where illness or invasion could erase a community overnight, made personal fame seem fleeting. In the scriptorium, this anonymity fosters a sense of shared endeavor. Each scribe contributes to a collective tapestry, their identities blending into the ink they wield. It's a mystery that invites contemplation, a subtle enigma that adds to the calming allure of their existence. Much like the way a single wave merges with the sea. As the hours pass, the scribe pauses only for brief moments to stretch his fingers, cramped from gripping the quill, or to sip watered ale from a clay cup, its earthy flavor grounding him in the present. The wool of his robe, now warmed by his body, offers a comforting weight, while the damp stone beneath his feet reminds him of the monastery's ancient foundations, built on layers of history. Outside, the wind might howl through the grasses, but inside, all is stillness, a pocket of peace where time slows to the pace of a carefully drawn letter. This life, so removed from the halls of power or the fields of conflict, emphasizes the quiet dignity of labor, where every stroke of the quill is an act of creation, preserving the fragile threads of knowledge for future generations. In the evenings, as shadows lengthen across the scriptorium, the monks gather for a simple meal: barley bread, perhaps, with a bit of cheese and ale before retiring to their cells. The day's work leaves a satisfying ache in the hands, a reminder of accomplishments unseen. The parchment pages, now filled with neat rows of text, await binding, their fate tied to the monastery's survival. And in this routine, there's a subtle wit to the scribe's world. Imagine the wry smile of a monk realizing that while kings come and go, his copied words might outlast them all. A quiet triumph in anonymity. To expand on this craft, consider the tools at hand. The quill, derived from a goose feather, must be cut at just the right angle to produce a fine line, a skill passed down through oral tradition since Roman times. The ink, too, holds its own story. Made by boiling galls with vinegar, it stains the fingers a deep brown, a badge of the scribe's trade that lingers for days. Sensory details abound: the cool slip of the parchment, the metallic scent of fresh ink, the rhythmic tap of the quill against the desk when sharpened. These elements create a tapestry of experience, drawing the listener into a state of serene reflection. Drawing from manuscript records, such as those from Lindisfarne itself, we know that scribes often worked on texts like the Gospels or Psalters, their efforts documented in the margins or colophons, though rarely with names. One example from the early 8th century involves a manuscript now housed in distant archives, where the scribe's hand reveals a mastery that speaks volumes without words. This anonymity, tied to the Anglo Saxon chronicle style, underscores a cultural value: the collective over the individual, the eternal over the ephemeral. As we conclude this gentle exploration, remember that the life of an Anglo Saxon scribe was one of profound solitude and craft, a balm for the soul in turbulent times. While we've touched on the mysteries and rhythms of their world, the story continues, leading us toward other facets of this era. For now, let this narrative cradle you into peaceful thoughts, like the soft scratch of a quill fading into the night. In the dim glow of Winchester's ancient halls, where shadows danced like whispers on the stone walls, King Alfred sat in quiet contemplation. The air carried the faint scent of beeswax candles, their flames flickering steadily against the cool evening breeze that slipped through narrow windows. He wore a simple tunic of deep blue wool, embroidered with threads that evoked the wisdom of books and scrolls, a garment chosen not for ostentation, but to symbolize his unyielding pursuit of knowledge. Around him, the soft rustle of parchment pages turning filled the space, a gentle rhythm like the breath of the hall itself, inviting all who entered to pause and reflect. Alfred, the great King of Wessex, had ascended to the throne year 871, a time when the realm yearned for stability amid the ebb and flow of challenges. Yet here, in these serene chambers, one sensed not the clamor of conflict, but the steady pulse of intellectual revival. Seated at a sturdy oak table, polished smooth by years of use, he leaned over manuscripts illuminated by the warm light of candles placed in wrought iron holders. The wax melted slowly, dripping like tears of time, while the king's fingers, calloused yet careful, traced the edges of Latin texts. His face, framed by a neatly trimmed beard, bore the lines of a man who had seen much, but chose to turn his gaze toward the light of learning. It was Alfred's vision that transformed the halls of Wessex into sanctuaries of education, a legacy drawn from the pages of Asser's own account, where the king's reforms were chronicled with the precision of a master scribe. He believed that knowledge was the true fortress of a kingdom, more enduring than stone or sword. In those early years of his reign, he gathered scholars from far and wide, their voices a soft murmur in the corridors, discussing the ancient wisdom of Rome and the insights of Christian thought. The halls echoed with the subtle scratch of quills on vellum, a sound as soothing as rain on thatched roofs, while the scent of ink, earthy and slightly metallic, mingled with the herbal aromas from nearby herb gardens. One of Alfred's most profound reforms was the establishment of schools, not merely for the elite, but for those who would shape the future of the land. He decreed that every free-born youth should learn to read and write, a notion as revolutionary as it was gentle in its intent. In Winchester, under the soft glow of hanging lanterns that swayed with the slightest draught, young minds gathered in modest rooms lined with shelves of books. The king himself, ever the student, delved into Latin works, translating them into the common tongue so that the people of Wessex might access the treasures of the past. His renditions of Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy and Gregory's Pastoral Care became cornerstones, their pages crisp and inviting, the ink gleaming like stars in the candlelight. As the evenings deepened, Alfred would pace the halls, his footsteps a muted echo on the flagstone floors, pondering how education could mend the fabric of society. He envisioned a Wessex where clerics and nobles alike could debate the virtues of governance. Their discussions carried on a breeze, perfumed by late blooming roses from the courtyard. The air grew cooler then, carrying the distant hoot of an owl, a reminder of the world's quiet mysteries. In Asser's writings, we learn of Alfred's insistence on personal study, how he carried books with him even in his travels, their leather bindings worn smooth by his touch. This dedication infused his reforms with a personal warmth, as if each lesson imparted was a gift from a wise elder. Yet, amid this pursuit of enlightenment, there lingered a subtle enigma, the mystery of the unwritten royal decrees. Whispers in the halls spoke of ideas that Alfred held close, thoughts perhaps too fragile or profound to commit to parchment. These were not commands of war or law, but visions of a society built on deeper truths, ideas that floated like smoke from the candles, elusive and intangible. One might imagine him in the hush of midnight, staring into the flame, as if seeking answers in its dance, contemplating reforms that never found their way into the annals. Asser's account hints at such possibilities, noting the king's habit of reflecting in solitude, where his mind wandered to uncharted territories of thought. Was it a forgotten plan to expand libraries beyond the churches? Or perhaps a dream of universal access to learning for even the humblest folk? The uncertainty added a layer of intrigue, like the faint outline of a constellation, just beyond the reach of the stars, visible through Winchester's high windows. In those reforming years, from 871 to 899, Alfred's efforts bore fruit in ways that rippled through the kingdom. He encouraged the creation of the Anglo Saxon Chronicle, a tapestry of history woven with threads of ink and insight. Its pages turned gently in the halls as scholars read aloud in voices soft as a lullaby. The Chronicle's entries, with their rhythmic prose, captured the essence of his educational push, emphasizing not battles, but the building of minds. Sensory details abounded in these sessions. The warmth of a fire crackling in the hearth, the subtle creak of wooden benches as listeners shifted, and the earthy taste of ale shared among companions after hours of study. Alfred's wit shone through in his translations, where he infused dry texts with a touch of humor, turning philosophical debates into engaging tales that sparked smiles rather than solemn nods. His reforms extended to the clergy, whom he urged to teach with patience and clarity. In the quiet chapels adjacent to the halls, priests pored over illuminated manuscripts, their robes brushing against the cold stone as they moved. The candlelight reflected off golden letters, creating patterns that danced like fireflies, while the air filled with the faint, sacred scent of incense. Alfred himself, in his tunic adorned with motifs of quills and books, would join these gatherings, his presence a calming force, guiding discussions with questions that probed gently, like a stream smoothing pebbles over time. Asser's narrative reveals how this approach fostered a renaissance of learning, with monasteries becoming centers of scholarship, their libraries stocked with works that whispered secrets of the past. As the years unfolded, Alfred's educational legacy grew, much like the ivy that crept up the walls of Winchester. Resilient and enduring, he established a court school where the sons of nobles learned alongside promising commoners, a blend that promised a more harmonious realm. The sensory world of these lessons was rich. The cool press of a stone floor underfoot, the rustle of robes as students leaned in to share ideas, and the occasional chime of a bell marking the hour, its tone soft and inviting. Subtle wit laced his teachings, as when he likened the pursuit of knowledge to a gentle river, ever flowing but never rushing, a metaphor that brought quiet laughter to his listeners. Yet the mystery of those unwritten decrees persisted, a shadow in the candlelight that added depth to his story. Perhaps they held keys to reforms that time erased, ideas about fostering arts or sciences that never materialized. In the stillness of the halls, one could almost hear the echo of unspoken words, carried on the night air like a distant melody. Asser's account, while detailed, leaves room for such speculation, reminding us that not all of history is captured in ink. Through it all, Alfred's reign in Wessex became a beacon of intellectual light, a soothing narrative of progress amid the quiet of the ages. As the candles burned low, their wicks sputtering softly, the king would retire to his chambers, the scent of parchment lingering like a faithful companion. In this way, his story flows onward, a lullaby of learning that prepares the mind for what lies ahead, where new tales of history await their turn in the grand tapestry of time. In the hushed corners of 9th century England, where ancient stones cradled the whispers of forgotten lore, a gentle mist often draped the abbeys like a soft blanket at dusk. The air carried the faint scent of ink and aged parchment, a reminder of the quiet labor that preserved the world's memories. Amid these serene walls, scribes once bent over their work, their robes whispering against the wooden tables. But now, shadows of uncertainty lingered, as if the very earth held its breath before a storm. It was in these vulnerable havens that the first hints of turmoil emerged, not with thunderous clashes, but with the distant echo of longships cutting through the waves. Viking raiders, drawn by tales of glittering treasures and sacred texts, swept across the shores like an unhurried tide. Their arrivals were foretold in the annals of Bede, the venerable scholar whose words painted a portrait of a land teetering on the edge of change. He spoke of invasions that disrupted the fragile peace, leaving behind a trail of what-ifs and vanished wonders. Archaeological digs at sites like Jarrow and Whitby have unearthed fragments, charred bits of vellum, perhaps once part of grand codices that whisper of losses too profound to fully grasp. Imagine, if you will, the scribes in their simple woolen robes, their movements deliberate and graceful, as they gathered what they could in the face of encroaching flames. The air grew thick with smoke, a woody perfume mingled with the acrid tang of burning thatch, wrapping around them like an unwelcome shawl. They fled not in panic, but with a resigned rhythm, their sandaled feet padding softly over dew-kissed grass, carrying bundles of manuscripts that crinkled gently in their arms. The vellum felt cool and brittle under their fingers, its edges fraying like the threads of a fading dream, a tactile echo of centuries of careful craftsmanship. These raids, as chronicled in Bede's accounts and corroborated by excavations at ravaged monasteries, were not mere acts of destruction, but harbingers of mystery. The Vikings, with their swift oars and unyielding resolve, targeted the heart of Anglo Saxon learning, where illuminated gospels and poetic epics recited. One such enigma revolves around the fate of texts from the scriptoria of Lindisfarne, where, according to reports from digs in the 1970, evidence of fire-scorched foundations suggests a hurried evacuation. The manuscripts, adorned with intricate designs of interlaced beasts and golden letters, vanished into the ether, leaving behind only ghostly impressions in the soil. As the raiders advanced, the scribe's world dissolved into a symphony of subtle sensations. The crackle of flames provided a low lullaby-like murmur, almost soothing in its regularity, while embers danced in the air like fireflies at twilight. The smoke curled around the fleeing figures, carrying with it the earthy aroma of smoldering herbs from the monastery gardens, a stark contrast to the usual scent of fresh ink that once filled the halls. In these moments, the unknown deepened, for not all losses were immediate. Some manuscripts, perhaps secreted away in hidden crypts, or carried across the sea by desperate hands, slipped into obscurity, their whereabouts a puzzle that archaeologists still ponder. Bede's writings, preserved through the ages, offer glimpses into this era's uncertainties. He described how the Northmen, as he called them, descended upon holy sites with a calculated precision, their longships materializing on the horizon like mirages. Yet what Bede could not foresee were the layers of mystery that would envelop these events. Modern reports from excavations at Repton and other raided locales reveal caches of metalwork and bone fragments, hinting at the chaos without delving into the gore. The manuscripts, those fragile repositories of knowledge, became spectral entities gone, but not entirely forgotten. One particular riddle involves a rumored collection from the monastery at Croyland, where accounts suggest that a few tomes were spirited away by loyal brothers, only to disappear amid the marshes. Did they sink into the boggy earth, preserved in its peaty embrace, or were they claimed by distant shores? In the midst of flight, the scribes paused briefly in shadowed groves, their robes damp with evening dew, to catch their breath. The night air was cool against their skin, carrying the faint, rhythmic lapping of nearby streams, a natural counterpoint to the distant roar of pillaging. They might have whispered prayers over the manuscripts, feeling the weight of history in every page, the smooth grain of the vellum, the faint embossing of letters etched by predecessors. Subtle wit emerged in their plight. One might imagine a scribe with a wry smile hidden beneath his hood, murmuring that the Vikings were merely overzealous borrowers, though the consequence was a silence that echoed through the ages. The mystery deepens when considering the unknowns preserved in archaeological evidence. Digs at sites like Hexham have uncovered remnants of bindings and ink pots, suggesting that not all was lost to fire. Perhaps some texts found their way into unintended hands, altered or fragmented, becoming part of a larger tapestry of cultural exchange. Bede's narratives while focused on the spiritual toll, align with these findings, painting a picture of a world where knowledge ebbed and flowed like the tides that brought the raiders. The lost manuscripts, with their tales of heroic deeds and divine visions, represent a void in our understanding, a gentle enigma that invites contemplation rather than despair. As the nights grew longer, the scribes continued their exodus. The path ahead, shrouded in a fine mist that softened the stars above, the air held a lingering warmth from the day's embers, and the ground beneath their feet released the scent of crushed ferns, a earthy reminder of nature's indifference to human strife. In this detached retelling, the consequences unfold like a slow, unraveling thread. Communities scattered, lore dispersed, and the Anglo Saxon heritage forever altered. Yet there is a quiet beauty in the mystery, a subtle wit in how these losses sparked new beginnings, as if the manuscripts themselves were whispers carried on the wind, waiting to be rediscovered. Archaeological reports from the British Museum's archives detail similar patterns at other sites, where layers of ash and debris speak of repeated incursions. The sensory tapestry of these events, the velvety touch of smoke against the skin, the melodic rustle of pages in the breeze, adds depth to the narrative, transforming tragedy into a contemplative lull. One can almost hear the faint hum of ancient chants echoing from the hills, a testament to resilience amid the unknown. In closing, as the last embers faded and the scribes vanished into the folds of history, the mystery of these lost manuscripts lingers like a half-remembered dream. They invite us to ponder what might have been, bridging the past and present in a seamless flow. And so, we turn our gaze forward to the echoes that follow, where new tales await in the quiet dawn. In the fading light of a September evening in 9th century Wessex, the great timber hall stood as a beacon amid the rolling hills, its thatched roof blending into the twilight sky like a gentle whisper from the ancient earth. Constructed from stout oak beams hewn by skilled hands, the hall rose with a quiet majesty, its walls adorned with woven tapestries that depicted hunts and harvests in threads of wool dyed with hues from woodland berries and river clays. Here, in this sanctuary of stone and wood, the nobles of Wessex gathered, their lives woven into the fabric of a world where the seasons turned with the rhythm of the stars, and the warmth of shared fires softened the edges of the long nights. The air inside the hall carried a soft, inviting aroma, the scent of mead fermenting in earthenware jars, its honeyed sweetness mingling with the earthy tang of roasted venison turning on the spit. Crackling hearths lined the walls, their flames dancing like playful spirits, casting a golden glow that illuminated the faces of the assembled lords and ladies. Each fire was fed with logs of applewood and beech, releasing faint wisps of smoke that curled upward toward the rafters, carrying with them the subtle wit of the winds whisper through the thatch. The nobles, draped in fur-lined cloaks of marten and fox, moved with a graceful ease, their garments a testament to the opulence that defined their world. These cloaks, soft as a summer breeze against the skin, were lined with furs traded from distant northern lands, their edges embroidered with intricate patterns of silver thread that glinted in the firelight, hinting at the wealth hidden within the hall's shadowed corners. At the high table, seated on benches carved from ancient yew, the Ealdormen and their kin feasted upon platters heaped with delicacies wild boar glazed in honey, loaves of barley bread still warm from the oven, and apples preserved in spiced syrups that evoked the orchards beyond the hall. The sound of conversation flowed like a gentle stream, punctuated by the occasional lute string plucked in a soft melody, its notes weaving through the air like threads of a dream. One might catch a subtle jest from a noble, a light-hearted quip about the day's hunt, or the mead's lingering warmth, delivered with a wry smile that softened the room's grandeur. The hall's floor, strewn with fresh rushes scented with lavender and thyme, cushioned each step, while the faint rustle of servants moving in the background added a rhythmic undercurrent, like the heartbeat of the estate itself. Life in this noble hall unfolded with a serene cadence, far removed from the clamor of battlefields or the scribbled records of daily toil. The day began with the dawn's first light filtering through the narrow windows, where carved shutters opened to reveal mist-shrouded meadows and the distant call of rooks in the oaks. By midday, the hall buzzed with preparations for the evening's revels, as cooks stirred cauldrons over open flames, their tools echoing the archaeological remnants found in places like the Yevering site, where similar halls revealed pits for feasting and storage. These structures, unearthed by modern eyes, spoke of a society where opulence was not merely displayed, but lived, with treasures of gold and garnet brooches adorning the elite, much as they did in the halls of Wessex. As evening deepened, the feasting reached its peak, the tables laden with silver goblets that caught the fire's flicker, each one a relic of craftsmanship passed down through generations. The nobles reclined on their benches, their fur-lined cloaks draped over shoulders like protective mantles, shielding them from the chill that crept in with the night. Sensory delights abounded. The crisp snap of a log in the hearth, the rich bouquet of ale brewed from local barley, its foam cresting like waves on a tranquil sea, and the delicate crunch of nuts gathered from the surrounding woods. One could almost taste the salt of the air from nearby rivers, where fish were netted and smoked, their flavors infusing the hall with a subtle, smoky essence that lingered on the palate long after the meal. Yet, beneath this veneer of tranquility, a quiet mystery wove through the hall's history, an enigma tied to the lost treasures that had vanished like shadows at dawn. In the dim recesses, where the firelight barely reached, whispers spoke of ornate caskets and jeweled ornaments, perhaps akin to those discovered in the Staffordshire hoard, where artifacts of gold and enamel hinted at the wealth of Anglo Saxon lords. These treasures, it was said, had been hidden away in secret compartments within the hall's thick walls, concealed during times of unrest to protect them from marauding bands. No one could say for certain what had become of them, whether they lay buried beneath the earthen floor, waiting for a fortunate soul to unearth them, or had been carried off in the dead of night by unseen hands. The mystery added a layer of gentle intrigue, a subtle undercurrent to the opulence, reminding all who dwelled there that even in prosperity, the world held its secrets, veiled like the mist over the hills. The servants, though unobtrusive, played their part in this orchestrated elegance, their movements as fluid as the river that fed the estate's mills. Dressed in simpler tunics of wool, they tended to the fires and refilled the goblets, their faces illuminated by the hearth's warm glow. One might imagine the hall as it appeared in archaeological reconstructions, with its central hearth and surrounding benches, a design that fostered community and shared stories. The nobles, in their finery, shared tales of the hunt, their voices rising and falling like the wind through the trees, each anecdote laced with a touch of wit that brought soft laughter echoing off the timber beams. As the night wore on, the hall grew quieter, the flames settling into a steady burn, their crackles softening to a lullaby like murmur. The air grew heavy with the scent of cooling embers and the faint herbal notes from the rushes, creating an atmosphere of peaceful repose. Here, in this haven of warmth and abundance, the nobles found solace, their lives a tapestry of sensory richness that archaeological finds, such as those from the Hamwick settlement, have only begun to unravel. The fur-lined cloaks, now drawn closer against the cooling air, whispered of journeys and trades that brought silks from afar, their textures a gentle reminder of the interconnected world beyond Wessex's borders. In moments like these, one could almost feel the weight of history settling over the hall, a calming presence that invited reflection. The mystery of the lost treasures lingered, a subtle enigma that added depth to the night's tranquility, much like the faint outline of stars emerging through the smoke hole in the roof. Yet it was not a source of fear, but a quiet curiosity, a detached observation of how even the most opulent lives held their unspoken secrets. Beyond the feasting, the hall served as a hub for the rhythms of daily life, where the morning's chores transitioned into evening's leisure. The nobles rose with the sun, stepping out to oversee the fields and flocks. But it was the return to the hall that brought true comfort. The sensory details of the space, the smooth grain of the wooden tables, the resonant hum of voices blending with the fire's song, created a cocoon of calm, a place where time seemed to slow, allowing for the subtle enjoyment of life's finer offerings. As the embers glowed lower, the hall's ambience shifted, the opulence fading into a serene hush. The nobles, sated and content, began to retire, their cloaks trailing behind them like echoes of the day's splendor. In this gentle close, one might ponder the enduring legacy of such halls, preserved in the fragments unearthed by time. From the intricate metalwork to the simple hearths that warmed generations. And so, as the last light dims and the hall settles into silence, we turn our thoughts to what lies beyond, where other tales await in the quiet folds of history, in the hushed dawn of a 9th century Anglo Saxon monastery. The world awakened not with clamor, but with the soft sigh of stone walls settling into the cool embrace of morning. The scriptorium stood as a sanctuary of shadows, its high arches cradling the first faint light that filtered through narrow windows, casting elongated shapes across the worn wooden tables. Here, in this realm of quiet devotion, the monks moved like whispers, their woolen robes brushing against the chill floor with a rhythm as steady as the heartbeat of the earth itself. The day began not with ink or vellum, but with the ancient call to prayer, a ritual that wove through the monastery's veins like a river, carving its path. Robed figures, their hoods drawn low, emerged from narrow cells where the night's thin blankets had barely shielded them from the damp air. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of mossy stones and the lingering trace of last evening's hearth smoke, a subtle reminder of the fire's fleeting warmth. As they gathered in the dim cloister, the monks' bare feet padded softly on the flagstones, each step echoing faintly in the vast silence. One might imagine a wry smile hidden beneath those hoods, for even in their solemnity, there was a gentle wit to their endurance, the way they shook off the night's chill as if it were an old, familiar jest, whispering of how the cold sharpened the mind for the day's labors. By the time the sun climbed higher, casting a pale glow through the scriptorium's slits of glass, the monks had settled at their stations. Each man wore the same coarse robe, dyed in earthy tones that blended with the room's muted palette, its sleeves rolled back to reveal forearms marked by years of patient toil. They sat on low stools, their bodies bent over great sheets of vellum, stretched taut on slanted desks, the material's subtle grain whispering under their touch like the skin of an ancient beast. The quills, fashioned from goose feathers plucked in the monastery's own yards, waited in simple wooden holders, their tips already sharpened to a fine point with a knife's careful stroke. Ink pots, filled with a deep black mixture of oak galls and iron, sat nearby, their surfaces ringed with dried residue that spoke of endless hours poured into the work. As the morning unfolded, the routine took hold with the precision of a well-worn chant. A monk would dip his quill into the ink, the liquid clinging to the nib with a satisfying weight, and then draw it across the vellum in slow, deliberate strokes. The scratch of the quill was a constant companion, a soft, rhythmic sound like rain pattering on leaves, each line forming letters that danced in elegant scripts, perhaps the angular runes of earlier traditions, or the flowing Carolingian minuscules that had begun to spread from the continent, the air filled with the scent of the ink, a tangy mix of ferrous tang and vegetal bitterness, mingling with the musty aroma of the vellum itself, treated with lime and stretched until it was as smooth as a calm lake surface. One could almost hear the subtle humor in it, the way the quill might skip ever so slightly, as if protesting the monk's steady hand with a playful nudge, reminding him that even in perfection, there was room for imperfection's charm. Throughout the day, the scriptorium pulsed with this measured cadence. Meals were simple interludes, bread and weak ale consumed in the refectory with bowed heads and murmured graces, the flavors bland yet comforting. A brief respite before returning to the desks. The monks ate quickly, their minds already drifting back to unfinished pages, the taste of coarse grain lingering on their tongues like a promise of the work ahead. Afternoons brought longer sessions, the light shifting to a warmer hue as the sun arced overhead, illuminating the dust motes that swirled in the air like tiny stars. Each monk worked in isolation, yet in harmony, their breaths synchronized to the task. The cold stone beneath their seats seeping through their robes to remind them of the earth's unyielding presence. A faint draft might stir the edges of a page, carrying with it the distant scent of the monastery's herb garden lavender and thyme, their essences drifting in to soothe the senses amid the intensity of creation. Yet, woven into this tapestry of routine was a quiet mystery, one that lingered like an unspoken secret in the monastery's shadowed corners. The schedules of these scribes, though governed by the monastic hours, matins, lauds, prime, and beyond, often went unrecorded in the annals that they themselves preserved. Historical fragments from manuscripts like the Rule of St. Benedict or the accounts in the Anglo Saxon Chronicle hint at a structure, but the exact rhythms of their days remain elusive, as if the scribes guarded their habits with the same care they gave to their texts. One might ponder, with a touch of wry curiosity, how these men, so meticulous in copying the deeds of kings and saints, left their own daily patterns to fade into obscurity. Was it intentional? A humble erasure of self in service to the divine, or perhaps a subtle jest of fate, where the very hands that chronicled history chose to omit the mundane details of their existence, leaving modern eyes to wonder at the gaps. As the afternoon waned, the monks paused for vespers, their voices rising in chant that echoed through the stone halls, the notes wrapping around the senses like a warm cloak against the encroaching evening chill. The scriptorium, now dimmer, saw them return with renewed focus, their quills resuming their dance under the flicker of tallow candles. The light cast a golden glow on the vellum, highlighting the intricate illuminations, perhaps a flourish of red from crushed insects, or a touch of gold leaf that caught the eye like a hidden treasure. The cold stone walls, damp with the breath of centuries, seemed to absorb the sounds, muffling the quill's scratch into a lullaby that soothed the weary soul. In these moments, one could feel the subtle wit of their endurance, the way they transformed labor into meditation, turning each stroke into a quiet rebellion against the world's chaos. Evenings brought a gradual winding down, the monks cleaning their tools with meticulous care, wiping quills with damp cloths that smelled of lye and water, capping ink pots to preserve the precious mixture. The vellum pages, now dry and crisp, were stacked with reverence, their edges whispering against one another in the fading light. The mystery of their unrecorded schedules deepened here, in the twilight hours, where personal devotions and rest blurred into the unknown. Scribes like those at Lindisfarne or Wearmouth Jarrow, as noted in surviving records, might have varied their routines based on seasonal demands or the abbot's discretion. Yet, no ledger captured these nuances. It was as if the day ended not with a final stroke, but with a gentle fade, leaving behind only the echoes of their work. Through it all, the sensory world enveloped them, the cool press of stone underfoot, the warm wax scent of candles, the soft rustle of robes as bodies shifted in quiet concentration. One might imagine a monk pausing, quill in hand, to gaze at the window where the day's last light lingered, a faint smile crossing his lips at the thought of tomorrow's repetition. For in this cycle, there was a calming constancy, a lullaby of routine that whispered of eternity. And so, as the night deepened and the scriptorium fell into silence, the monks retired, their days labor a thread in the vast weave of history. Yet the mystery endures, inviting reflection on what was left unwritten, a bridge to the tales that follow. In the dim glow of the scriptorium, where shadows danced like whispers on ancient stone walls, the monks of a quiet abbey in 9th century England bent over their work with a serenity that seemed to hush the very air. It was a world apart from the clamor of the outside, a realm where time unfolded slowly, like the unfurling of a fragile leaf. Here, in the heart of Anglo Saxon England, a group of devoted scribes adorned vellum pages with colors that gleamed like distant stars, their hands moving in rhythmic strokes that echoed the gentle pulse of the earth, drawing from the traditions of the Lindisfarne Gospels. These illuminators transformed simple texts into treasures, weaving intricate designs that spoke of faith and mystery. The air was thick with the faint, earthy scent of pigments ground from rare minerals, a subtle fragrance that lingered like a half-forgotten dream, inviting the mind to wander through the soft haze of creation. The monks themselves were figures of quiet grace, clad in simple woolen tunics that fell in loose folds around their bodies, the fabric worn soft from years of humble labor. Each wore a cord at the waist, holding pouches of tools, delicate brushes fashioned from squirrel hair, quills smoothed by patient fingers, and tiny pots of gold leaf that caught the candlelight in fleeting sparks. As they worked, their movements were unhurried, almost meditative, a dance of precision amid the flickering warmth of tallow lamps. One monk, his face lined with the wisdom of many seasons, dipped a brush into a mixture of egg yolk and ground lapis lazuli, the deep blue pigment evoking the vastness of the sea. The brush, so light and fine, glided across the prepared vellum with a whisper, leaving behind trails of color that seemed to breathe life into the page. The vellum itself was a marvel, calfskin scraped and stretched until it was as smooth as a calm river stone, ready to receive the golden touches that would make it shine. Around them, the scriptorium hummed with a peaceful rhythm, the kind that soothed the soul like a lullaby carried on the wind. The scent of paint fumes rose gently, a blend of linseed oil and crushed herbs that mingled with the musty aroma of aged parchments stacked in neat piles. It was not an overpowering smell, but a comforting one, like the earthy breath of the forest after rain, wrapping the room in a cocoon of tranquility. Soft brushes swept across the surface, their bristles making the faintest susurration, a sound so delicate it could be mistaken for the rustle of leaves in a hidden glade. The monks worked in silence, broken only by the occasional murmur of a prayer or the soft clink of a pestle grinding pigments in a mortar. Gold leaf, hammered thin as a whisper, was carefully applied with a breath of warm air, adhering to the page in shimmering patterns that mimicked the interlaced vines and beasts of the Lindisfarne Gospels. These designs, with their swirling knots and vibrant hues, were more than mere decoration. They were bridges to the divine, crafted with techniques passed down through generations, yet shrouded in a veil of enigma that time had begun to fray. As the hours passed, the light from the narrow windows softened, casting a golden haze over the scene. The warmth of the room enveloped everything, a gentle heat from the nearby brazier that made the air feel like a soft embrace. One could almost taste the faint bitterness of the pigments on the tongue, a reminder of the rare ingredients sourced from distant lands: cinnabar from the east, malachite from the hills, and the elusive orpiment that glowed like sunlight trapped in stone. The monks' tunics brushed against the wooden tables as they leaned in, their fingers stained with hues that told stories of their dedication. In this space, the act of illumination was a sacred ritual, an extension of the Lindisfarne Gospel's legacy, where every stroke honored the saints and scholars who had come before. The Gospels themselves, with their elaborate initials and border illustrations, served as a guiding light, their pages a testament to the artistry of earlier centuries. Yet, even as the monks replicated these forms, they pondered the secrets embedded in the work, techniques that seemed to defy simple explanation. There was a mystery to it all, a subtle puzzle that wove through the very fabric of their craft. How had the scribes of Lindisfarne achieved such vivid permanence in their colors? Colors that endured where others faded like morning mist. Whispers among the brotherhood spoke of lost methods, perhaps involving ancient recipes for binders that fused pigment to vellum with an unbreakable bond, or rituals of preparation that aligned the work with celestial rhythms. One elder monk, his eyes twinkling with quiet wit, often remarked that the gold seemed to hold a spark of the divine, as if the angels themselves had breathed upon it during creation. This enigma added a layer of wonder to their daily toil, a gentle reminder that not all knowledge could be grasped. Much like the way the wind slips through one's fingers, the monks approached this mystery with a detached curiosity, focusing not on the frustration of what was unknowable, but on the beauty it inspired. In the soft glow of their lamps, they experimented subtly, mixing powders and oils in new combinations, hoping to glimpse the shadows of those forgotten arts. Sensory details enriched every moment of their work. The cool touch of the vellum under their fingertips contrasted with the warmth of the gold leaf as it was pressed into place, creating a tactile harmony that soothed the senses. The faint crackle of drying paint, like the settling of autumn leaves, provided a rhythmic backdrop to their thoughts. Even the taste of the air, tinged with a metallic hint of gold, and the herbal notes of their pigments evoked a sense of timelessness. In this corner of the abbey, far from the world's tumults, the monks found solace in these sensations, allowing them to drift into a state of peaceful absorption. Drawing from the Lindisfarne Gospels, they crafted illuminations that featured interlaced patterns of animals and foliage, each element meticulously balanced to create a harmonious whole. The gold, applied with such care, caught the light in ways that made the pages seem alive, as if they pulsed with an inner light. Yet amid this calm, the mystery persisted, a subtle undercurrent that lent depth to their endeavors. What precise ratios of egg tempera and water had the ancient scribes used to achieve such luminosity? Or how had they ensured that the colors resisted the dampness of England's foggy coasts? The monks speculated in hushed tones, their words carrying a lullaby like quality, as if sharing a bedtime tale, one might say, with a hint of wry humor, that the secrets were guarded by the very saints depicted in the margins, who watched over the work with benevolent eyes. This wit, light as a feather, kept their spirits buoyant, turning potential frustration into a shared amusement. They expanded their own techniques, grinding malachite finer than before, or experimenting with the warmth of sunlight versus candle flame to set their colors, all while honoring the historical precedents set by Lindisfarne. As evening deepened, the scriptorium grew quieter still, the monks pausing to stretch their weary limbs and admire their progress. The vellum pages, now adorned with golden halos and intricate borders, seemed to glow with an otherworldly grace, a bridge between the earthly and the eternal. Sensory memories lingered the smooth glide of the brush, the aromatic blend of paints, the gentle warmth that enveloped the room, each detail weaving into the tapestry of their day. In these moments, the lost techniques felt less like a void and more like an invitation, a mystery that enriched their calling rather than diminished it. Drawing inspiration from the Lindisfarne Gospels, they continued their work, knowing that their illuminations would outlast them, carrying echoes of this serene world into the future. And so, as the last light faded, the monks prepared to rest, their minds drifting toward the morrow's tasks. Yet, in the quiet that followed, one could sense the thread leading onward to other stories waiting to unfold, where the light of knowledge might reveal yet more wonders of the past. In the hushed embrace of a 9th century Anglo Saxon monastery, where stone walls whispered secrets of ancient faith, the scribes turned their hearts from ink and parchment to the solemn rhythm of religious duties. These devoted monks, clad in simple woolen robes that draped like shadows in the flickering candlelight, gathered in the dim chapels as dusk softened the world outside. The air carried the faint, resinous scent of incense, wisps curling upward, a gentle veil that mingled with the cool stone's chill and the earthy aroma of aged wood. Here, amid the quiet sanctity, their voices rose in soft hymns, a lullaby of devotion that echoed through the arches, weaving a tapestry of sound as delicate as the first light of dawn. Drawing from the annals of Bede's ecclesiastical history, we glimpse the structured piety that defined these hours, where every breath aligned with divine will. The scribes, though stewards of words, found their truest calling in the liturgy, performing duties that bound them to the heavens. Each day began with the canonical hours, a cycle of prayers that pulsed like the monastery's heartbeat. In the early morning, as mist clung to the surrounding hills, they assembled for matins, their robes brushing against the cold flagstones with a whisper soft rustle. Bede himself chronicled how such routines fortified the soul, noting in his history the steadfastness of early English monks who, like those at Wearmouth or Jarrow, upheld traditions inherited from Roman and Celtic forebears. The scribes led these chants, their voices blending in harmonious waves, each note a thread in the fabric of communal worship. The chapels, with their vaulted ceilings and narrow windows, admitting only slivers of pale light, became sanctuaries of serenity. Imagine the soft pressure of the monks, bare feet on the uneven floor, the faint warmth of bodies huddled close in prayer, and the subtle spice of frankincense that lingered on the air like a forgotten dream. Their duties extended beyond mere recitation. They participated in the Mass, where the elevation of the host drew forth murmurs of awe, a ritual bead described as central to the Anglo-Saxon Christian life. In these moments, the scribes embodied the spirit of humility, their hands calloused from quills, now set aside, folded in supplication. A gentle wit infused their gatherings, as one might overhear a murmured jest about the way the incense smoke danced capriciously, evoking the playful whims of angels unseen. As the hours progressed, the scribes moved through vespers and compline, their chants evolving from the bright clarity of day to the introspective hush of evening. The hymns, drawn from psalters and antiphonaries, flowed like a river's current, their melodies simple yet profound, carrying echoes of Gregory the Great's reforms that Bede so admired. Each verse was intoned with a measured cadence, the words wrapping around the listeners like a warm cloak against the drafts that seeped through the chapel's cracks. Sensory details abounded. The cool touch of holy water sprinkled from a silver aspergillum, the faint taste of sacramental wine that hinted at earth's bounty, and the rhythmic sway of hooded figures as they processed in line, their robes whispering against one another in a symphony of fabric. Yet amid this ordered devotion, there lingered the mystery of unwritten prayers, an enigma that Bede hinted at in his reflections on the inner life of the faithful. These were the silent invocations, the personal pleas uttered in the heart's quiet corners, never committed to page or scroll. In the dim glow of a single candle, a scribe might pause during his duties, his eyes closing as he offered words that dissolved into the ether, unrecorded, and thus eternally elusive. This mystery added a layer of depth to their religious observances, suggesting that not all sacred acts were meant for the world's scrutiny. Bede, in his history, spoke of miracles and visions that arose from such unspoken devotions, like the ethereal experiences of saints who communed directly with the divine. For the scribes, these unwritten prayers represented a hidden realm where the soul's whispers mingled with the incense, leaving only faint traces in the air, a scent that evoked curiosity without resolution. A subtle wit in the universe's design. The monks' robes, often of undyed wool that carried the faint odor of lanolin and herbs, symbolized their renunciation of worldly vanities, a detail Bede emphasized in his accounts of monastic reform. As they chanted, the fabric shifted with each breath, creating a soft susurration that blended with the hymn's gentle rise and fall. One could almost feel the weight of history in those garments, woven from threads that connected the present to the apostolic age. In the chapels, the air grew thick with devotion, the incense wisps curling like spectral fingers toward the rafters, where shadows played tricks on the eye. A scribe might glance upward, a hint of wry amusement in his expression, pondering how these unseen vapors mirrored the fleeting nature of human thoughts. Much like Bede's wry observations on the transience of earthly kings throughout their duties, the scribes maintained a rhythm that honored the liturgical calendar. From the feasts of saints to the penitential seasons, Bede's ecclesiastical history recounts how such observances fostered unity among the Anglo Saxon communities, with scribes at the forefront, their voices bridging the gap between heaven and earth. During Advent or Lent, the chants took on a more subdued tone, the hymn's soft cadences evoking the rustle of leaves in a winter wind, while the incense burned slower, its aroma deepening into a meditative haze. These moments were not without their subtle challenges. The cold seeping from the stones could numb fingers, yet the monks persevered, their breath visible in the chill, a misty veil that added to the scene's ethereal quality. In these gatherings, the mystery of unwritten prayers wove through the fabric of daily life. A thread unseen yet palpable. Bede alluded to such intangibles in his narratives of early missionaries, where faith's power lay not in written decrees, but in the heart's unspoken resolve. For the scribes, this meant that their religious duties extended beyond the audible chants to the silent spaces between words, where prayers floated like incense, untethered and profound. One might imagine a monk, his face serene in the candlelight, offering a personal entreaty that no chronicle could capture, its essence dissolving into the monastery's timeless air. As the evening drew to a close, the final chants of Compline faded into whispers, leaving the chapels in peaceful repose. The scribes, their robes settling like fallen leaves, retreated to their cells, carrying with them the lingering scent of devotion. Yet, as the night deepened, thoughts turned toward the morrow, where other facets of monastic existence awaited, ready to unfold in the quiet dawn. Transition. And so, from the echoes of prayer, we move to the next revelation of monastic life. Word count 1,523 in the hushed expanse of a 9th century Anglo Saxon monastery, where stone walls cradled the fading light of day. A quiet rhythm bound the scribes together like threads in an unseen tapestry. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of damp parchment and aged wood, mingling with the distant whisper of wind through the cloisters. Here, in these sanctuaries of learning places, like the scriptoriums of Lindisfarne, or the halls of Jarrow monks, moved with a gentle purpose, their lives woven not by grand deeds, but by the subtle ties of shared existence. As evening fell, they gathered in the refectory, figures in simple woolen tunics, their hoods drawn against the chill, to partake in meals that nourished both body and spirit. The refectory itself was a long, low chamber, its rough-hewn beams arching overhead like protective arms. Flickering candles cast a warm, golden glow, softening the shadows and illuminating faces etched with the quiet lines of devotion. The monks, many of them scribes who spent their days bent over illuminated manuscripts, entered in a slow procession, their sandaled feet padding softly against the flagstone floor. Each wore a tunic of undyed wool, its fabric coarse yet comforting, draped over their frames like a second skin. As they settled at the wooden trestle tables, the air grew thick with anticipation, a subtle fragrance of herbs and simmering broth rising from the large iron cauldrons at the far end. One by one, the bowls were filled with a simple stew, its surface bubbling gently with the soft sizzle of root vegetables and barley. The aroma was modest, but inviting a blend of garlic's mild pungency, the sweet earthiness of carrots, and the subtle smokiness of wood-fired cooking. A monk would ladle it out with practiced care, the steam curling upward in lazy spirals, carrying hints of thyme and the faint saltiness of preserved fish. As the bowls were passed along, The monks ate in silence, save for the occasional murmur of gratitude or a whispered blessing. Their voices, like the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. The meal was not extravagant, but in its simplicity lay a profound comfort. The warmth of the stew seeping into their bones, easing the day's weariness. Yet beyond the physical sustenance, these gatherings fostered bonds that ran deep, invisible currents in the stream of monastic life. In the rule of St. Benedict, which guided their days, there was an emphasis on mutual support, on living as a community where each monk was both brother and guardian to the others. A scribe might nod across the table to a fellow laborer, their eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken understanding, forged through shared hardships like the long winters or the quiet struggles of illness. These connections were not born of grand declarations, but of small, everyday acts. A hand extended to steady a weary brother, or a shared chuckle at the day's minor mishaps, like a dropped spoon clattering against the stone floor, its echo fading into the ambient hush. The refectory's atmosphere was one of serene harmony, the soft murmurs blending with the occasional scrape of wooden spoons against bowls. One could almost feel the collective breath of the group, a rhythmic rise and fall that spoke of unity. The air, cool and slightly damp from the monastery's proximity to a nearby river, carried the faint tang of the outdoors, reminding them of the world beyond their walls. As they ate, the stew's flavors unfolded slowly. First the hearty bite of turnips, then the mellow creaminess of leeks, all tempered by a hint of honeyed sweetness from wild herbs gathered at dawn. It was in these moments that the scribe's bonds revealed themselves, not through words, but through gestures. A tilt of the head in quiet conversation, or the way one monk would pass an extra piece of bread to another without a word, as if anticipating a need before it was voiced. Historical accounts from monastic records, such as those preserved in the Liber de Virtutibus of the Anglo Saxon Church, hint at these understated alliances. In the annals of places like Wearmouth Jarrow, we glimpse references to brothers who supported one another through trials, their friendships implied in the margins of illuminated texts, or in the careful annotations of shared manuscripts. Yet there lies a mystery in these unwritten friendships, a subtle enigma that lingers like mist over a dawn-lit field. For while the records detail the routines of prayer and labor, they seldom capture the personal affections that must have flourished in the shadows. Did a young scribe, fresh from the novice's cell, find solace in the steady presence of an elder brother, their bond sealed over countless evenings like this one? Or were their alliances formed in the quiet hours, alliances that shaped the community's resilience but left no trace in the chronicles? This mystery adds a layer of gentle intrigue to their world, a whisper of what remains unsaid. In the refectory, as the meal progressed, the monks might exchange a knowing glance, their expressions softened by the candlelight, hinting at stories never committed to vellum. Perhaps it was the way one scribe, his tunic sleeves rolled to reveal ink-stained fingers, would lean slightly toward his neighbor, their shoulders brushing in a fleeting moment of camaraderie. The air, now warmed by the press of bodies and the fading heat of the stew, carried a comforting scent of wool and faint perspiration, grounding them in their shared humanity. These bonds, though ephemeral, were the monastery's true strength, a web of loyalty that withstood the uncertainties of the age raids from the sea, harsh harvests, or the ever-present shadow of mortality. As the bowls emptied, the monks lingered, their movements deliberate and unhurried. The refectory's ambience shifted subtly, the initial buzz of soft voices giving way to a deeper quiet, punctuated only by the occasional sigh or the gentle clink of a cup being set down. One might notice the play of light on the stone walls, casting elongated shadows that danced like silent companions. The stew's remnants, cooled now, released a final waft of savory steam, a reminder of the nourishment that extended beyond the physical. In these pauses, the scribe's connections deepened, their unwritten friendships a testament to the enduring power of community. Drawing from the accounts in the Anglo Saxon charters and the letters of Alcuin, who corresponded with monastic leaders of the time, we see echoes of this communal spirit. Alcuin's writings, for instance, speak of the sweet fellowship among brethren, though they veil the personal in layers of piety. Yet the mystery persists. What secrets lay hidden in the hearts of these men? Friendships that blossomed in the refectory's glow, but were never recorded. Perhaps a scribe, his mind weary from copying texts, found unexpected joy in the company of a kindred soul, their bond a quiet rebellion against the solitude of their calling. The evening meal drew to a close, the monks rising with a collective grace, their tunics rustling softly as they moved. The air, now cooler, carried the faint scent of evening prayers to come, a transition from the refectory's warmth to the chapel's solemnity. In this cycle, the community bonds endured, a calming undercurrent in the flow of monastic life, where even the mysteries of unspoken ties offered a subtle wit to the soul's quiet reflections. As they departed, one could imagine the night unfolding, the stars emerging like distant kin, hinting at connections yet to be explored in the chapters ahead. In the dim glow of a 9th century English monastery, where shadows lingered like gentle whispers on the cold stone walls, the air carried the faint, earthy scent of crushed herbs and warmed honey. Monks in simple woolen robes moved with quiet purpose through the infirmary, their sandaled feet brushing against the chill flagstones that seemed to hold the memory of countless seasons. Here, amid the arched vaults and wooden shelves lined with clay pots, the scribes of the scriptorium sought solace from the subtle aches that came with their meticulous work, not the duties of prayer or the rhythm of quills, but the quiet art of tending to the body's needs, drawing from ancient wisdom preserved in texts like Bald's Leech Book, a compilation of remedies as mysterious as the mists rolling in from the nearby fens. The infirmary was a haven of soft light, filtered through narrow windows where the day's last rays danced on vials of infused oils. A monk named Aelfric, his robe frayed at the edges from years of wear, knelt by a low table, grinding fennel seeds with a smooth stone pestle. The rhythmic motion released a warm, anise-like aroma that filled the room, mingling with the steam rising from a nearby cauldron. In that steam, one could almost feel the invisible threads of healing, a gentle veil that softened the air and eased the mind. Aelfric's hands, calloused yet deliberate, worked without haste, for time in this space flowed like the slow drip of dew from an overhanging eave. He had learned these practices from the Leech Book, a tome bound in worn leather, its pages whispering of herbs gathered at dawn's first light. For the scribes, whose eyes grew weary from poring over illuminated manuscripts, remedies began with the eyes themselves. Bald's Leech Book spoke of a soothing eye wash made from eye-bright herb steeped in rainwater, its petals as delicate as the first snowflake. Aelfric would prepare it carefully, pouring the lukewarm liquid into a shallow bowl, where it caught the flicker of a tallow candle. The steam rose in lazy tendrils, carrying a fresh, grassy scent that evoked meadows kissed by morning dew. As a scribe reclined on a simple pallet, his head cradled by a cushion of dried lavender, Aelfric would gently apply the wash with a clean cloth. The coolness against the eyelids brought a sigh of relief, like the touch of a summer breeze on overheated skin, easing the strain that blurred the edges of words on parchment. Beyond the eyes, the body harbored other whispers of discomfort, stiff joints from hours bent over desks, or the occasional pang in the back that crept like an uninvited guest. Here, the Leech Book offered salves of comfrey root and willow bark, ground into a paste with a hint of beeswax for smoothness. Aelfric would heat the mixture over a low flame, the pot emitting a soft, woody fragrance that wrapped around the room like a comforting shawl. The steam curled upward, warm and inviting, its moisture kissing the air and leaving a faint sheen on the stone floor. As he applied the salve to a scribe's back, the monk's fingers moved with the steadiness of a river's flow, the balm's cool texture seeping into the skin, numbing the ache as if drawing it away into the ether. In these moments, the mystery of lost recipes added a layer of quiet intrigue, like echoes from a forgotten hall. Bald's Leech Book hinted at remedies that had slipped through the fingers of time, formulas once whispered among healers, but now faded like ink exposed to rain. Perhaps it was a potion for the deepest weariness, brewed from rare nightshade and elderberry, its exact proportions carried away by the winds of history. Aelfric often pondered this as he sorted through his herbs, the dried leaves crumbling under his touch with a papery rustle. The uncertainty lent a subtle charm to their work, a reminder that not all knowledge could be captured, much like the way moonlight danced on water only to vanish at dawn. Yet in the infirmary, they pressed on with what remained, their efforts a testament to the enduring dance between man and nature. The day might bring a scribe with a cough that lingered like autumn fog, persistent and unyielding. From the leech book, Aelfric drew upon a remedy of thyme and honey, boiled together until the mixture thickened into a golden syrup. The steam from the pot carried a herbaceous warmth, spiced with the sweetness of honeycombs freshly harvested. As the scribe sipped from a wooden cup, the liquid coated his throat with a soothing velvet, the taste evoking the wild hills where thyme grew in abundance. Outside, the distant call of birds added a melodic backdrop, their songs blending with the soft bubbling of the cauldron, creating a symphony of healing that lulled the senses into peace. Not all ailments were as benign. Sometimes a fever would take hold, its grip firm but met with detached resolve. The leech book prescribed feverfew, its daisy-like flowers dried and steeped into a tea that carried a bitter, earthy tang. Aelfric prepared it with care, the steam rising in delicate plumes that filled the air with a clean, green scent. Like fresh cut grass under a gray sky, the monk would place a cool compress on the scribe's forehead, the stone-cooled cloth drawing heat away, as if siphoning it into the ancient walls. In these instances, the tone of the infirmary remained calm, focusing on the path to recovery rather than the fire of illness itself. A subtle wit emerging in the way Aelfric might murmur, "Even the sturdiest oak bends to the wind, only to stand taller after." As evening deepened, the infirmary transformed into a realm of soft repose. Candles flickered, casting elongated shadows that played across the herbs hanging from rafters, their dried forms releasing faint, spicy aromas with each stir of air. Aelfric would recount tales from the leech book, not of grand battles or divine interventions, but of simple cures passed down through generations, liniments for swollen feet made from mustard seeds and vinegar, or compresses of dock leaves for minor irritations. The vinegar's sharp scent cut through the room like a precise note in a melody, balanced by the earthy undertones of the leaves, creating a sensory tapestry that enveloped all who entered. Yet woven into this daily rhythm was the enigma of what had been lost. Legends spoke of a remedy for the mind's fog, perhaps a blend of sage and rosemary that sharpened thoughts like a well-honed quill. But its recipe had vanished, leaving only fragments in the leech book's margins. Aelfric would pause in his work, his fingers pausing over a bundle of sage, its woolly leaves releasing a pungent, clarifying aroma that seemed to tease at forgotten knowledge. This mystery added a gentle allure, a whisper that not all healing could be grasped, encouraging the monks to innovate with what they had, perhaps adding a dash of mint for its cooling breath, or wild garlic for its robust warmth. Through it all, the infirmary remained a sanctuary, its stone floors retaining the day's coolness, even as the fire's embers glowed. The scribes, restored by these practices, would rise with a renewed sense of balance, their bodies aligned like the stars in the night sky. Aelfric's role was one of quiet guardianship, his subtle wit shining through in the way he might jest that a well-timed herb could outwit the most stubborn ailment, much like a clever fox evading a trap. As the night deepened, the air grew heavy with the mingled scents of lavender and chamomile, lulling all into a restful slumber. And so, as the herbs steeped and the shadows lengthened, the focus shifted gently from the body's needs to the broader tapestry of life, where each remedy was but a thread in the weave of existence, leading onward to new horizons. In the hushed heart of a 9th century monastery, where stone walls cradled the whispers of ancient wisdom, the scriptorium stood as a sanctuary of ink and aspiration. Dim candlelight flickered across wooden tables, casting soft shadows that danced like fireflies on the novices' worn tunics, each thread a testament to humble beginnings. Here, amid the cool stone and the faint scent of beeswax, young boys gathered not for battle or harvest, but for the quiet art of shaping words that would outlast kings and kingdoms. Their days unfolded in a rhythm as steady as the monastery's bells, yet veiled in the gentle mystery of traditions passed not through grand tomes, but through the subtle guidance of seasoned scribes. The novices, scarcely more than children, arrived with hands unscarred by quills, their tunics of coarse wool hanging loosely over slender frames. They sat on low stools, backs straight as the lines they aimed to draw, under the watchful eye of a master scribe, whose beard flowed like the rivers in the manuscripts he guarded. These masters, drawn from the likes of those chronicled in the Anglo Saxon manuscripts, such as the fragmentary records of St. Gall or the directives in the Rule of Crodgang, imparted skills with a patience born of years bent over parchment. The training began with the basics, the forming of letters that echoed the elegant insular script, a style that swept across England like a soft breeze from the Irish shores. As the boys gripped their goose quills, the first scratches emerged, soft, hesitant sounds that whispered against the vellum, like rain tapping on a thatched roof in the dead of night. Each stroke required a steady hand, trained through endless repetition, for the quill's tip, sharpened to a fine point, demanded precision. The masters would demonstrate with fluid motions, their fingers guiding the novice's own, imparting the feel of the feather's weight and the subtle resistance of ink flowing from a clay pot nearby. The air carried the earthy aroma of the ink, a mix of oak galls and iron salts, mingled with the musty scent of aged parchment that spoke of distant sheep pastures and careful curing. In these sessions, the novices learned to master the alphabet, tracing the angular forms of Anglo Saxon runes before transitioning to the rounded curves of Latin script, as evidenced in the surviving folios of the Book of Kells contemporaries. Yet there was a quiet wit in the process, a subtle irony that the masters might share in low murmurs. See how the letter stands proud, like a monk who thinks he's abbot, but bends under the weight of proper pressure. The boys would chuckle softly, their fatigue eased by such light-hearted asides, as they practiced forming words that held the power of prayer and law. The scriptorium itself was a realm of sensory symphony, where the golden glow of tallow candles illuminated faces, etched with concentration. The light played tricks, turning the novices' shadows into elongated figures on the walls, as if ancient scribes from beads' histories lingered to observe. The warmth from the flames kissed their cheeks, contrasting with the cool drafts that slipped through cracks in the stone, carrying hints of the monastery's herb gardens, lavender and sage, that sharpened the mind for the task at hand. Each novice held his breath as he dipped the quill, the soft plink of ink against the pot, a rhythmic counterpoint to the scratching that followed, a sound so delicate it might lull a weary traveler to sleep. Training extended beyond mere letter forming. It encompassed the endurance of the hand and the clarity of the mind. Historical records, like those in the capitularies of Charlemagne, or the monastic rules preserved in English abbeys, hint at exercises where novices copied psalms or simple texts, building speed and accuracy through repetition. A boy might spend hours on a single line, his tunic sleeves rolled to reveal forearms speckled with ink splatters. Like stars on a midnight sky, the masters emphasized the importance of posture, warning that a slumped back invited errors, much as a crooked plowshare spoiled the field. Straight as the path to heaven, they might quip with a knowing smile, their words carrying a gentle reminder of the spiritual weight of their craft. Yet, woven through this structured learning was an enigma that even the manuscripts could not fully capture: the unrecorded methods that shaped the scribe's true mastery. While texts like the Anglo Saxon chronicle detail the products of such labor, they offer scant clues to the oral traditions and intuitive techniques passed in hushed tones or through gestures alone. Perhaps it was in the way a master adjusted a novice's grip with a feather-light touch, imparting a feel for the quill's balance that no written word could convey. Or maybe it lay in the silent observation of errors, where a boy learned from a master's raised eyebrow rather than explicit correction, fostering an instinct for perfection that eluded documentation. This mystery, like a shadow in the candlelight, added a layer of allure to the training, suggesting that some knowledge was meant to be felt, not inscribed. As the days lengthened into weeks, the novices progressed to more complex exercises, drawing from the sparse but telling references in early medieval texts. They practiced varying the pressure on the quill to achieve different line thicknesses, a skill that mimicked the natural flow of spoken language. The sensation of the vellum under their fingers, smooth yet textured like the bark of an ancient oak, became second nature, teaching them to anticipate how ink would spread and pool. The air grew thick with the scent of freshly prepared pigments, though the focus remained on the script itself, not the colors that adorned other works. A subtle wit emerged in their camaraderie, as one boy might tease another for a wavering line, saying, "Your E looks more like a wandering sheep than a letter," eliciting soft laughter that echoed gently off the walls. The training demanded not only physical dexterity, but mental fortitude, drawing on the resilience described in accounts of monastic life, such as those in Alcuin's letters. Novices learned to ignore the ache in their fingers, the scratch of wool against skin, and the occasional drip of wax that cooled on the table like a forgotten tear. In moments of quiet reflection, they might ponder the words they inscribed, finding solace in the rhythm of their work, which mirrored the steady beat of the monastery's prayers. The candlelight, ever flickering, cast a warm veil over their efforts, turning the scriptorium into a cocoon of tranquility. Through it all, the mystery persisted, a gentle undercurrent that whispered of secrets held close to the heart of the craft. Perhaps the unrecorded methods involved rhythmic breathing techniques, synchronized with the quills movements to maintain steady hands, or mnemonic devices tied to the monastery's chants that aided memory without leaving a trace in the texts. Such possibilities, inferred from the gaps in historical records, lent an air of enchantment to the novice's journey, reminding them that not all knowledge sought the light of day. As the novices' skills sharpened, their tunics growing stained with the badges of their labor, the scriptorium became a bridge between the past and the future. They emerged not just as copiers of words, but as guardians of a legacy, ready to contribute to the monastery's vast collection. And as the candle waned, casting its final glow, one might glance toward the door, sensing the wider world that awaited, a world of chronicles and codices, where their training would weave into the tapestry of history. Yet for now, the gentle hum of the scriptorium lingered, a lullaby of ink and light, leading seamlessly to the tales of those who carried such skills beyond these walls. In the dim glow of a 9th century scriptorium, nestled within the stone walls of an English monastery, a group of monks moved with the quiet rhythm of the seasons, clad in simple woolen robes that whispered against the cool air. They gathered around long wooden tables, their faces softened by the flicker of tallow candles. The room held a peacefulness, like the breath between heartbeats, where the world outside its wars and woes seemed a distant echo. Here, in this sanctuary of learning, the scribes tended to their craft, preparing the very foundations of knowledge with tools born from earth and animal, tools that had been honed through generations, yet carried the shadow of forgotten ingenuity. The monks began with vellum, that precious skin stretched taut like a canvas for eternity. It came from calves or lambs, selected for their smoothness, and raised with care in the monastery's own herds. To prepare it, they first soaked the hides in lime pits, a process that softened the fibers and leached away the flesh, leaving behind a pale, yielding material. The air in the scriptorium carried a faint, earthy tang, the scent of wet animal hide mingling with the musty stone, a reminder of life's cycle rendered into utility. One monk, his robe's sleeves rolled to reveal calloused hands, would lift the treated skin from its bath, laying it flat on a broad oak frame. There, with a steady hand, he wielded a lunellum, a curved knife, with a blade as thin as a whisper. The tool's edge, forged from iron gleaned from local smithies, scraped gently across the surface, removing any lingering hairs or imperfections. Each stroke produced a soft, rhythmic sound, like the rustle of leaves in a summer breeze, calming in its repetition, drawing the mind into a meditative trance. As the vellum dried, another monk took up a pumice stone, its gray surface pitted and cool to the touch. This humble tool, sourced from riverbeds and smoothed by nature's own hand, was rubbed in slow circles over the prepared skin. The friction created a faint, whispering grit, a sound that evoked the gentle lap of waves against a shore, while the vellum emerged smoother than silk, ready for the ink that would soon grace its fibers. The monks worked in silence, their movements deliberate and unhurried, as if time itself bent to their will. Occasionally, a subtle wit surfaced in their shared glances, a wry smile at how a particularly stubborn hide resisted the knife, as if the animal's spirit lingered to tease them. Beyond the preparation of vellum, the scribes relied on an array of implements for mixing and applying inks. The ink itself was a concoction of oak galls, harvested from the twisted branches of ancient trees in the surrounding forests. These galls, small and hard like marbles, were crushed in stone mortars with iron pestles, the tools heavy and worn from years of use. The process released a sharp, woody aroma, tinged with the bitterness of ferrous salts added for depth, filling the air with a scent that was both invigorating and soothing, like the breath of the forest distilled into essence. One monk would measure the ingredients carefully, his fingers dusted with fine powder, the texture gritty yet satisfying under his touch. He poured the mixture into earthenware pots, glazed with a simple sheen that caught the candlelight, their surfaces cool and smooth when handled. These pots, unearthed in archaeological digs at sites like Jarrow or Whitby, reveal the ingenuity of Anglo Saxon craftsmen who shaped them on primitive wheels turned by foot. The quills, oh, those elegant feathers plucked from geese raised in the monastery's coops, were another marvel, selected for their strength and flexibility. The feathers were cured over low fires, their natural oils baking away to leave them supple. A scribe would trim the tip with a small penknife, its blade sharp and precise, honed on leather strops that hung from the table edges. The sound of the knife slicing through the quill was crisp and clean, like the snap of a twig underfoot on an autumn walk. A momentary interruption in the scriptorium's hush dipped into the ink pot. The quill absorbed the liquid with a soft, sucking noise, ready to trace lines upon the vellum. The monks handled these tools with with a reverence that spoke of their scarcity. A well-crafted quill could last weeks, its nib reshaped multiple times before wearing down. Yet, not all tools were so straightforward. Straight edges and rulers, often made from whalebone or ivory traded from distant shores, ensured the vellum's lines remained straight and true. These materials, lightweight and durable, were smoothed with sand from the nearby rivers, their edges polished to a satin finish when run along the vellum. The ruler produced a faint, guiding scrape, a tactile anchor in the sea of creativity. Archaeological evidence from excavations at places like Repton hints at even more specialized instruments, perhaps awls for piercing holes or compasses for marking circles. But these remain elusive, their designs lost to time. The mystery of such vanished tools adds a layer of intrigue, a subtle puzzle that lingers like mist over a morning field. How did the scribes craft implements that adapted to the uneven surfaces of vellum? Tools that archaeology suggests were more advanced than we might assume. Fragments found in monastic ruins, like the iron remnants at Winchester, tease at innovations that died with their makers, perhaps carried away in Viking raids or buried under centuries of soil. In those quiet hours, the monks might pause to clean their tools, wiping knives with oiled rags that carried the warm scent of linseed, a fragrance that evoked fields of golden crops swaying in the wind. The rags themselves were woven from coarse wool, their fibers rough, yet comforting against the skin, a simple counterpoint to the precision of the work. Every tool had its place in a wooden chest, lined with straw to prevent rust, the chest's lid closing with a soft thud that echoed faintly in the room. Here, the subtle wit of the scribes shone through in their nicknames for these implements: the whispering blade for the linellum, or the forest's blood for the ink light-hearted monikers that softened the labor's intensity. As the day waned, the scriptorium's atmosphere grew even more serene, the candle flames dancing lazily as dusk settled outside. The tools, though mundane in form, were vessels of history, each one a link to the Anglo Saxon world, pieced together from digs at Lindisfarne and beyond. Iron style, used for initial sketches on wax tablets before committing to vellum, were another staple. Their pointed ends, cooled in forges that belched smoke into the sky, left faint impressions that could be erased and rewritten. The wax tablets themselves, framed in wood and filled with beeswax gathered from local hives, carried a sweet, honeyed aroma when warmed by the scribe's hands, a sensory delight that made the work feel almost playful. Through it all, the mystery of lost tool designs wove a quiet thread. What secrets might have been encoded in the curves of a forgotten awl, or the balance of a misplaced compass? Artifacts from 9th century sites, such as those at Canterbury, show partial tools that don't quite match any known designs, suggesting innovations that evolved and then vanished, perhaps due to the upheavals of the time. It is a gentle enigma, one that that invites contemplation rather than urgency, as if the past whispers its unfinished stories to those who listen. The monks, ever mindful of their task, ensured that each tool was not just functional, but a testament to resourcefulness. Strings of gut, derived from the same animals as the vellum, served as ties for scrolls. Their twine-like texture, slightly sticky when new, these were stretched and tested with a soft pluck, producing a low, resonant hum that filled the room like a distant harp. The overall process, from preparing materials to maintaining tools, formed a cycle as natural as the turning of the seasons, a calming ritual in an uncertain world. As evening deepened, the scribes set aside their implements, their robes settling around them like shadows. The scriptorium, with its array of tools and materials, stood as a bridge to the unknown, where the mysteries of the past lingered just out of reach. And so, with the tools carefully stored and the vellum waiting in silence, one might turn thoughts to the words that would soon flow from them, leading gently into the tales yet to be told. In the dim glow of flickering candles, the ancient scriptorium of a 9th century English monastery settled into the hush of evening. Monks in simple woolen tunics, their sleeves frayed from years of labor, moved with a quiet rhythm through the stone-walled chamber. The air carried a faint, earthy scent of aged vellum and beeswax, wrapping the space in a veil of serenity that whispered of timeless devotion. Here, amid the shadows, these guardians of knowledge tended to their sacred charge, the preservation of manuscripts that held the fragile threads of history. The process began with the careful handling of the vellum itself, a material born from the skins of calves or lambs, prepared through rituals passed down from generations before. A monk, his hands calloused yet gentle, would first inspect each sheet under the soft light, his fingers tracing the smooth, taut surface that felt like cool silk beneath his touch. To preserve its integrity, they employed methods drawn from the sparse records of earlier scribes, such as those noted in the marginalia of the Lindisfarne Gospels, or the practical notes in the St. Gall manuscript plans. The vellum was cleaned with a mixture of water and mild alkaline solutions, perhaps derived from wood ash, to remove any lingering oils or dirt that might invite decay. As he worked, the monk might hum a low, wordless tune, a subtle wit in his steady breath, as if mocking the relentless march of time that sought to erode their efforts. Once cleansed, the manuscripts were bound with simple yet effective techniques. Leather cords, tanned to a supple flexibility, wrapped around wooden boards covered in hide, creating covers that could shield the pages from the damp English air. The monks knew well the perils of moisture, for the island's mists could seep into the very fibers of the vellum, fostering mold that spread like unseen shadows. To combat this, they rubbed the edges with a paste of ground chalk and egg white, a remedy whispered in the annals of early medieval treatises. The faint, chalky dust would linger in the air, tickling the nose with a dry, mineral tang, while the egg white's subtle sheen caught the candlelight, offering a quiet glimmer of protection. It was a dance of practicality and reverence, each step performed with the precision of a ritual. Storage was the true art, a labor of love that unfolded in the monastery's storerooms, where oak chests stood like silent sentinels. These sturdy vessels, hewn from the heartwood of ancient trees, creaked softly as the monks lifted their heavy lids, the sound a gentle sigh echoing through the cool stone. Inside, the air was thick with the musty aroma of dried herbs, perhaps lavender or thyme, scattered among the folds to ward off insects and dampness. The monks, their tunics brushing against the wood with a soft rustle, arranged the manuscripts in neat stacks, ensuring no page touched another directly. They might line the chests with linen cloths, woven from the monastery's own looms, to create a buffer against the rough grain of the oak. As one brother carefully placed a codex into its place, the chest's hinges groaned in protest, a low, soothing creak that blended with the distant murmur of evening prayers, reminding all within earshot